All right, folks. Today we are going to talk elements and principles of design or elements and principles of art. All right. Now, I know that quite a few of you have taken Intro to 2D Art, but I still want to review all of these elements and principles just in case you haven't had a previous art class. All right. Now, the elements and principles are the same whether or not you're in a ceramics class, an Intro to 3D class, a painting class, it doesn't matter. They're still all the same thing, okay? Now, your elements that we're going to talk about at first, and we've already talked about a couple like line, shape, and form when we were working with wire, but combining these elements is how we really create a composition and how we create these principles of design that we're going to talk about in just a minute. Now, I want you to start looking at things three-dimensionally, all right? So we know that a line is really going to be used to help define space, suggest contours or outlines. And in 3D, it's really going to be used to suggest mass and volume. All right. So even though this is a sculpture, we don't really have a line drawn on it, but we do have a lot of implied lines created by the edges of our form, and it's creating that really cool spiral line that we see. Now, shape's going to be a line that has really closed itself off and has a recognizable boundary, okay? So for example, a circle shape, right? A sphere is a form, okay? So we really have to focus in here on how to take shapes and change them from two-dimensional into three-dimensional forms, all right? You'll use me hear those words a lot. I refer to things as shapes too, but we really want to talk about things three-dimensionally as forms. We're going to use color in here, and we're going to use it the same way we did in a 2D class. We won't focus nearly as much on that surface treatment as you would in, say, a painting class or something like that, but we still want to know how color can change a composition, all right? So we have three different properties we're going to focus on: hue, value, and intensity. Hue is really the name of a specific color. All right, value is the degree or lightness of a color. So if we have pink, that's going to be a lighter value of red. And intensity is going to be how pure the color is, all right, or how saturated it is. Now, texture, we have implied texture, and then we have actual texture, right? So texture is going to be that surface quality of an artwork. It's usually perceived by the sense of touch. So if we look at our two artwork examples here, one of them is a three-dimensional sculpture, the one on the top, and if we were to actually touch that, we would feel the texture. Now, the one on the bottom of our cute little cat and dog down here, now those are going to be an implied texture, meaning they look very soft, they look very furry, but if I actually touch that, it's just a drawing, all right? I can't actually feel the fur. So that's going to be the difference between your implied and your actual texture. All right, then we're going to have space. Now, space, when we're talking about something two-dimensionally, is going to usually be created through perspective, okay? So how we have things that are farther away in the distance, smaller and higher up on our picture plane, things that are closer to us are going to be larger, all right? But we can also talk about positive and negative space. And a lot of times when we're looking at three-dimensional artwork, we're talking about the space in between something, around it, above, below, or anything that goes through it, okay? So we're going to refer a lot to positive and negative space in here. Then we have value, which we've already talked about because value is a property of color. So we already know that that means the darkness or lightness of a surface. All right, so those are all of our elements of design. Most of those you have known since elementary school, okay? We know what a line is. It's the same thing in math, okay? We know what shapes are and things like that. But how do we combine our elements to create a strong composition, all right? That is when our principles of design come into play. A composition that we're going to use that we're going to create to arrange our elements together, okay, that's what a composition is. Now, if you create a composition and it's done successfully, it's really going to draw the viewer in, and it's going to make them want to look at it a little bit more. If it's a weak composition, people are going to not want to look at it. Okay, we want to stop people in their tracks to look at our artwork, not let them keep on walking by because it doesn't look good. Now, unity is going to be our first principle of design. All right, unity means to bring everything together as one. All right, so a sense of wholeness. When I look at this piece of artwork, a couple of elements that I can talk about that create unity are the overall color scheme, right? It's all kind of bronzy or brown. I could also talk about the repeating texture that has been created from the ridges on each of those kind of crescent shapes, all right? So just there, I've talked about 3 elements that created the principle. All right, then we have balance. Now, balance refers to the stability in the artwork, okay? So how have those elements been arranged to create a sense of stability? We've got 3 different kinds of balance that we're going to talk about. There are more, but for our beginners, this is what we're going to focus on. We have asymmetrical balance, all right? So the top sculpture is asymmetrically balanced because if I look at it, I still have visual weight factors, all right? I have repeating color schemes. I have good use of positive and negative space. I have good use of proportions, all right? But when I look at the form distribution, okay, or the movement of those bodies, it looks more chaotic and more unorganized, all right? Another example would be if I had a deck of cards and I threw them up in the air, everywhere they land is random, right? I couldn't control it, but all of those cards relate via size and color scheme, okay? So even though I couldn't necessarily control that composition as well, everything still relates together. All right, our second one is symmetrical balance. This is a pretty easy one. Most people are familiar with it. So if we look at our little rabbit down there, if we were to fold that rabbit in half, we have the same elements of design on both sides. Okay, I have the same texture, same colors, same forms. Fold it in half, it's a mirror image. Our third one is radial. Now, radial balance is going to be a type of balance that anywhere I would cut it through that center axis point, it's going to be balanced, all right? So I could cut it through diagonally, horizontally, and vertically, and it's going to be equally balanced from that center axis point, okay? Radial and symmetrical do get confused a lot. Make sure that radial is some type of circular design all angled towards that central axis point. All right, our next one is emphasis. I think this one's really easy. Emphasis just means drawing your attention to something. So it's going to be that dominant element in the design. So for this sculpture, our cherry is definitely standing out more than anything else because of the element color, right? Everything else is kind of a lighter, you know, it's white, it's a light value also. And then we have our highly saturated red cherry that's sticking out. It's very emphasized. Our next one is going to be variety, all right? Variety means difference in kinds and quantities of those elements, okay? So if I look at our little mixed media Scotty dog here, and a couple of you actually sent this to me as a mixed media example, so good job. I'm looking for a lot of variety in shapes, variety in colors, variety in textures, all right? But along with variety, I also want to incorporate harmony. So even though they have a ton of different shapes in this sculpture, we do have repeating colors. So if we look at the red shapes that are all different, we see red repeated throughout, and that's also going to help harmonize the sculpture. Principles of design are not used just one at a time. A good, strong composition incorporates all of our principles of design into it. All right? We have 5 different types of rhythm. And whenever you are talking about rhythm, you should specify what type of rhythm that you're talking about, okay? So our first type of rhythm up here, our blue sculpture, is going to be an example of a flowing rhythm, all right? We have curving, flowing lines that are really leading our eyes all around the sculpture. Our regular rhythm is going to be this triangular sculpture down here. If you notice, all three sides of it are the exact same thing. So a regular rhythm means that we are repeating something over and over and over again. All right. Our third type of rhythm is going to be random. If you look at the top right sculpture, you'll notice that it is an asymmetrical balance. So typically with an asymmetrically balanced design, you're also going to have more of a random rhythm, okay? Meaning it's not super controlled, but again, we still have those visual weight factors that are helping to harmonize everything. All right, progressive rhythm. This is going to be our bottom right-hand example. Progressive means you're going to have a gradual change in something. So for example, this sculpture here, you'll notice it goes from a large circle and progressively gets smaller as we work our way down. All right, and the last type of rhythm is going to be alternating. All right, so if we were to think about alternating as a pattern of letters, it would be A, B, A, B, A, B, okay? If we want to think about it as a pattern of positive, negative space, we could look at our sculpture in the middle here, and we have an example of repeating positive, negative space. Okay, so that's our alternating rhythm example. Again, there are 5 times. Make sure that you talk about one type when you are describing artwork. Now, rhythm that we just talked about creates visual movement, all right? If I'm using a rhythm correctly, I should be creating visual movement that is leading my artwork all around the sculpture. And if we look at this sculpture example right here, it's a prime example of a flowing rhythm, all right? So the flowing rhythm that has been used creates visual movement. Again, see how the principles of design all relate together? All right, then we have repetition. This is my least favorite principle because it's talked about multiple times in other things. Repetition just means you're repeating something over and over again. So if we're looking at the sculpture on the right, we have a blue form that is repeated over and over again, also known as regular rhythm. All right, and I believe this is our last one. This is proportion. So proportion is going to be the size relationship of elements to each other. A big mistake that people tend to do that I count them off for, when you're talking about proportion, make sure that you're talking about size relationship within the sculpture. Don't compare it to things that are outside of it, okay? So if I'm talking about proportion of this sculpture, I can talk about the proportion of half of the bowling pin that it's cut into it, so it's not as tall as one of the other bowling pins where I see the entire size of that bowling pin. Okay, I can also talk about the size relationship of the bowling pins compared to the bowling ball. Okay, keep the size relationships only about things that you see. Don't compare them to other things outside of it. All right. We are going to talk about this later on, so we don't have to get there. What you need to do now, folks, please make sure that you take the practice quiz that I have on Canvas for today, and then you are done, and I will see you the next time you're in class.